You are watching Tech and AI Live. Now, I have a great presentation coming up with Antony Day, VP at Parity Technologies. His presentation is titled Some Important Things They Never Tell You About Blockchain. Antony is an experienced blockchain leader whose role at Parity focuses on helping founders, startups, and enterprises engage with Substrate and the Polkadot and Kusama ecosystems. He also hosts the Blockchain Won't Save the World podcast, which provides easy to understand examples of real world projects and the history of blockchain technology. So, welcome, Antony. It's great to have you here.
Hey, Catherine, thank you so much for the kind invitation. Very happy to be here. Very excited to share some of my experience with the audience. So very happy to start whenever you are.
Brilliant. Well, no, we'll kick off straight away because I know that there's a lot of content to get through. So the floor's yours.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. My name's Antony Day. I'd like to share with you today a presentation I call Important Things They Never Tell You About Blockchain. This is a condensed or shortened version of a longer training course that I provided with Blockchain Training Alliance called 10 Things They Never Tell You About Blockchain, which is designed essentially to go beyond the Blockchain 101, people understanding the basics of how blockchain technology works, talking more specifically about how to apply the technology or how to think about applying the technology. In this case, primarily focused towards an enterprise and government type of audience, but at the same time, equally applicable to those looking at startups or people working in Web3 as well as Web2. So very excited to share some of my experience and my learnings from the last 6 or 7 years working with blockchain technology. A little bit about me before we get started. I've been a growth strategist for about the last 20 years, working for large systems integrators and consulting companies like Deloitte and IBM, and more recently moved to Parity Technology, which is a full-blown Web3 organization helping to support Polkadot and Kusama ecosystems, developing Substrate as a language and a framework for developing on Polkadot. I've worked for about 6 years, 7 years with blockchain technology, supporting all range of different organizations around the world, from Canada down to Australia, working with developing the technology, putting it into production in a number of different settings. I would consider myself to be a pragmatic optimist when it comes to blockchain technology and Web3. So I'm not here for hype, and I'm sure most of you aren't either. It's really, in any case with any technology, whether it's blockchain, artificial intelligence, machine learning, cloud, automation of any kind, it's really about trying to find a good home for the technology, a good commercial case for doing so, a good rationale and applicability for it, and solving real world problems with it. In some cases, technology is so cutting edge that we're identifying or developing entirely new experiences, but still we're trying to link that back to a strong rationale for doing it. I've also been voted as a top voice for technology and innovation on LinkedIn. I have a podcast, as was mentioned at the start, Blockchain Won't Save the World. So if you're interested to learn more about the technology and hear from countries all around the world, Canada, Australia, Malta, Brazil, Israel, Japan, Netherlands, Germany, stories about how the technology is being applied, how different stakeholders are engaging with blockchain technology and creating communities and ecosystems, that could be something for you. And also, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm trying to post at least daily content around things that I find interesting or that can help others learn about the technology that I'm so passionate and interested in working with. So first things up, you're here to think or to learn more about blockchain technology. And what I'd like to start with is an overview of companies or organizations that are actually applying or working with this technology today. And I'll separate those into kind of two different categories: Web 2 companies, or those companies that didn't necessarily start with blockchain technology. These are some of the biggest brands, some of the biggest names in the world, right? NFL, Meta, PayPal, Visa, Google, Amazon, JP Morgan, well-known brand name organizations who all at some point have got their own blockchain development teams, have been developing propositions using the technology. On the right-hand side, you also have some of the Web3 companies, those who are born on the blockchain, those that you may not know. These are exchanges, these are protocols, a number of different types of player here who are providing the infrastructure, the technology, and the experiences that are native to Web3, to blockchain, to cryptocurrencies and digital assets. Let me reframe that into actually some of the categories of organizations. So if you're interested in working, if you already work in these industries, if you're interested in forming collaborations in these particular sectors, these are typical organizations and types of organizations where you may have an opportunity to connect, to engage, to even look for a job with these particular types of companies. On the left-hand side in Web2, you will struggle at this point in time to find any industry or any particular corner of the world where blockchain technology hasn't been explored. To varying degrees of maturity, or to varying degrees of quality, But in most cases, you'll find use cases or examples of the technology transforming different applications, different workflows, different experiences all around the world. And if you look at the right-hand side, these are some terms that may be new to you, but are important to learn because they are growing and they're growing fast. Decentralized finance, the protocol layers underneath that provide the transaction infrastructure, the data infrastructure, the automation behind it, RegTech, regulation-specific technology for crypto assets, digital assets, non-fungible token projects, decentralized application builders, applications that run on blockchains that are unstoppable, that are hosted across a series of nodes that will always be on, that can't be switched off, exchanges to be able to transfer digital assets with and to connect into the fiat or the kind of regular currency markets, digital asset banks, gaming companies, infrastructure providers, hosting, custody and wallet services. There's a lot to it. And for those people who maybe are slightly newer to Web3, these are some of the terms, these are some of the areas that are worth exploring, because these are some of the fundamentals of some of the key organizations that support blockchain and Web3 as we go. But I've said enough of the word blockchain, because as you talk about this, or as you think about this in your organization or where you work today, the term blockchain in and of itself is actually quite unhelpful. Whether we like it or not, from 2009 and the Bitcoin white paper onwards, we have unhelpfully created shorthand and bias relating to the term blockchain. If you say blockchain to anybody, whether they're young, old, experienced, junior, they're going to have some perception of what that means. It might mean Bitcoin to them. It might mean pictures of monkeys used for profile pictures. It might mean private networks. It might mean public networks. It might mean a whole range of different things. And when we're talking about digital transformation, it's important to be objective. And so when we talk actually about what does blockchain represent, what are the capabilities you get to play with, most platforms, if not all platforms, have some component of these different capabilities. The ability to manage, issue, and verify digital identity, to distribute data across multiple systems or multiple parties, to aggregate data from multiple parties, to be able to create a single source of truth, to be able to automate processes, to create applications that run in the cloud, that are unstoppable, that will always run regardless of whichever situation or whichever particular context they're running in. We call those smart contracts, but automation is incredibly powerful in terms of being able to create seamless, scalable, rapid, and high-performing systems. That they are tamper or censorship resistant, that they can't be switched off, which is more or less important in certain areas. The ability to create and issue digital assets, the ownership rights to digital things or the representation of ownership rights to physical things. Digital governance, the ability to have a community of people or organizations vote on certain things that matter, on how money is spent, how a roadmap is developed, and have that then be enacted on by an automated system. Digital governance, programmable economics, at the same time, the ability to create rules around how tokens, around how currency, around how a system can operate, and that they're also equitable, that they're accessible to all, that they're public in nature, and that they are privacy preserving at the same time. I haven't used the word blockchain in any of those things, but if you work in a sector, or if you can see problems or journeys where some of these capabilities can be useful, chances are blockchain is a technology that may help to address those problems or to transform something that's currently more painful or less efficient than it could be today. And also be mindful that it's not just about blockchain technology either. There are a number of technologies that work in consort with distributed ledgers or shared data networks that provide additional value, sensors, machines, the front-end experience in terms of augmented reality, virtual reality, artificial intelligence to interpret data that's happening on chain, some of the non-technology considerations like policy, law, and regulation. All of these things go together. As I said before, blockchain in isolation won't save the world, as any technology in isolation won't. It's about how we pair them with different other capabilities to transform or to create new experiences. So when I talk about blockchain capabilities, or when I talk about blockchain solutions, I typically replace the word blockchain with platform, system, or network, because those are ultimately the types of unbiased or neutral terms that these platforms or these capabilities represent. So if you're talking to others about this, if you want to get a fair hearing, talking about, I want to create a platform, I want to create a system, I want to create a network that does, rather than saying, I'm going to build a blockchain, or I'm going to build on blockchain and my thing is going to be blockchain powered. Let's move on from that. It's not helpful. You are not a blockchain business. So again, the same point here is maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when you were going to venture capital, or when you were going to your boss in your organization to say, I'm going to do a blockchain thing. I'm going to create a blockchain powered thing. That might have created some early hype value or some innovation value because it was new to the world at that time. Frankly speaking, I think it's unhelpful. And so when you're talking about what proposition you're bringing, the tech stack is a lot more than blockchain, and we should be more balanced in our description of it. So when we look at here's an example from Kaleido, what would a typical blockchain consortium stack look like? Yes, you have some specific blockchain components there, the blockchain network, on-chain data, maybe the digital assets that are held on the network. But at the same time, elements like data feeds, messaging, API gateways, any of the privacy or off-chain data that's stored, data buses, none of these are blockchain-specific capabilities. These are all other technologies that work in consort in your stack. So you are not a blockchain business, you are a technology-led business. And when you're talking about this to others, there are certain ways that we can help make it more engaging, or to again, get a fairer hearing when you want to talk about how you can transform with this technology. So how do we take the hype out? There are a number of different categories I've kind of presented here in terms of particularly talking to an enterprise or to a government audience, where we want to link things to the business rationale. Why is this technology coherent, or why does this help support our strategy? Is there a financial benefits case behind what we're doing? Yes, it might provide some differentiation in the short term, but long term, is it actually a capability that helps us? Does it allow access to certain capital or liquidity that we don't have today? Are we going to get more customers, or the ability to fractionalize some of the things that we're selling so that more people with less capital can bring capital into what we're doing, so that, again, as a business, we sell more, we have more turnover of stock, whatever else that might be? Or is this a catalyst for industry collaboration? In a lot of cases, that's a good place to start with your business rationale, and these things can be quantified. Tech capabilities: is having experience in working with digital assets or distributed ledgers going to enable your business or IT functions to do more things? Is it going to provide greater security, more process efficiency? Are you going to be able to disintermediate different parts of the system today that are currently causing bottlenecks, or that are costly or inefficient? Are we interested in particular customer outcomes? That could be the experience. It could be about creating loyalty, protecting customers, protecting their data, for example, empowering them to do more with the products and services that we provide. At what point are we thinking about how this looks from a customer standpoint? And then finally, risk. Are there particular risks in our business or in the way our technology is deployed that become lesser if we work with blockchain technology? There will be certain risks that will increase without question, but the compliance risk, the risk of doing nothing, competitive forces as well, is worth considering. Are there certain risks that we will be mitigating by applying a more decentralized approach to what we do? Again, or at least I don't believe I have used the word blockchain in there anywhere. So hopefully a helpful way of talking about the technology, or any technology, frankly. It doesn't necessarily relate to blockchain. And also at the same time, if you're having these conversations, illustrate with examples. As I said at the start, there are probably illustrations, use cases in every industry, in pretty much every country in the world, where some sort of decentralized approach, distributed ledger or public blockchain technology has been used to apply itself to certain problems or certain processes or certain workflows. And there's a raft of examples out there that you can pull from. So rather than talking about what blockchain can do or will do, talk about how company X did something here. Even if they didn't get into production, even if it was only a proof of concept, at least it's a way of illustrating what others have done to help build evidence behind what it is that you're trying to present. And then finally, ask yourself from some of the showstopper questions. Is centralization core to our strategy? Is having all of the data in the middle, being the single source of everything, important to our business succeeding in future? If we're an intermediary, chances are that's not going to be a strong case if we decentralize a network and data and transactions, because that eradicates our business model. Do we value transparency? Never try and sell blockchain and transparency networks to estate agents. They benefit from data disparity. So is transparency a good thing? Most people say from an ethical standpoint it is, but from a competitive standpoint, actually, is that a problem for us? Are we digitally mature? Do we work well with others? Do we have the capability internally to be able to take on this sort of engineering approach? Do we have complex physical processes that are hard to represent digitally? Are there competing pressures for investment? Of course there are. In every organization there are. And finally, and importantly, do we have the right talent? Working with these relatively new technologies requires some specific skill sets, particularly in engineering or in IT. So are we going to get access to that talent pool? It's expensive. Developers in blockchain and Web3 are hard to find right now because they're in high demand. So is that going to be a blocker for us as an organization? But on the flip side, there's also a number of different business models that we can bring to bear. These are some specific examples of ways of doing things or ways of creating value that are unique or kind of nuanced to Web3 that are available to those companies and organizations working in Web2 today. Decentralized finance, the ability to create assets, to access liquidity, to create derivatives and products, to be able to access capital in different ways. Decentralized finance also is about yield and staking, so making money. Is there a way that a traditional business can get access to new capital in a decentralized way? Tokenization of digital assets. It's far, far beyond just the issuing of digital art and profile pictures of bored apes and monkeys. It's a lot more than that. So actually issuing digital assets that represent products, that represent access to a particular solution, that represent credentials, for example. Tokenization of physical assets, commodity and real estate being some of the most well-known in this space. Decentralized autonomous organizations, a very new sphere, particularly in Web3, but actually being able to create borderless, autonomous, corporate-free governance organizations where people can vote with their tokens, where the system can automate activity. A limited scope at the moment. It's probably hard to believe that a decentralized organization will replace a corporate organization in most cases at the moment. But as the further we move on, the more this area is being explored and the more applications we might see in future. Digital identity and credentials I mentioned before, and also the metaverse. Most recently, and probably one of the most interesting and hypey areas around Web3 at the moment. How do we create, connect, collaborate, trade in a virtual environment that has different spaces, that have different economic models, that have different token models? Also, from an ethical standpoint, you've got to consider, is the tokenization and monetization of everything a good thing? What's going to be the human impact of that? What's the impact on your consumers and customers? Is this going to be ethical? Is this the right place for us to play? Are we skeuomorphically shoving our existing experience into something that's designed to be more expansive? Do we fit here? Or do we actually need to completely rewire our propositions? And you can see examples of established industries creating different platforms or different use cases across the likes of finance, technology, supply chain, insurance, trade finance, a whole bunch of different areas where the process efficiency or the rationale for using distributed ledgers or blockchains are clear and fairly well documented for the most part. We do need to think about strategy. And I learned this framework as one of the first things that I did when I joined a company called Monitor Group 20 years ago, is the play to win, or the cascade of choices, is thinking about, with technology or with any particular program or initiative, what are our aspirations? Where are we going to play? What's our segmentation? How are we going to win? How do we differentiate? What capabilities do we need, and what management systems are required? There's a Web3, there's a blockchain version of this that I think is important. So I want to share with you guys a little bit of an overlay that talks about, our aspirations are, what size of an ecosystem do we want? What sort of market cap, what sort of volumes do we want to be going through our platform? Where will we play? Are we targeting Web3 natives? Are we talking to people who have experience with wallets and crypto assets and decentralized finance? Or are we trying to bring a Web3 experience to the traditional or less experienced customer? Are we talking about creating work projects in blockchain friendly jurisdictions? Are we going to struggle in others where actually the holding of crypto assets or custody is particularly challenging, or in some cases may even be illegal? How do we win? How do we differentiate? What is it about the technology capabilities we're putting together that will make this more exciting than the current reference, the current alternative that may not have any decentralized technology underneath it? Performance, the ability to disintermediate, the ability to provide and empower users, the use of smart contracts for automation, the tokenomics or the programmable economics behind it, the pure cost. What are some of the capabilities as to why people will choose this? And then finally, what capabilities and how do we organize? Obviously developers, but also what's our approach to growth over time? Are we going to get funding up front and invest in a large organization? Or are we going to bootstrap? Are we going to grow small by small pieces at a time? Management systems matter here too. So are we talking about a fully remote model? Are we talking about a corporate structure if we're creating consortia? Are we looking at a decentralized autonomous organization where it's borderless, where it doesn't exist in any jurisdiction, which has certain implications around tax and incorporation and legal considerations as well? Sometimes a benefit, sometimes not. Lots to consider. And again, when you're talking about strategy, it's not just about who am I targeting with what. As I said on the previous slide, the capabilities and how you organize around these initiatives, particularly when it comes to consortia, can be some of the most challenging and hardest things to figure out. So as you talk through the initiatives you're proposing, to what extent are you talking about having a differentiated business strategy where the technology is an enabler of that? Or do I have a blockchain product idea that I haven't got a fully formed strategy for? I've seen lots of the second one, but what's important to focus on is the first one there, is to say, actually, we have a compelling reason for this business or this proposition to grow, or we're going to go and address a problem and we've got some technology that can be an enabler for that. And some important considerations as you scale these networks too. So importantly, the technology choices, and I'll come on to that in a minute. What locations and jurisdictions, again, the regulation differs significantly relating to particularly digital assets, crypto assets, or decentralized finance. What partnerships, who might you need to work with on this? How do you think about IP protection versus open source? Open source technology and open source code can be easily replicated. So while that's the ethos of Web3 primarily is we're going to deploy code that anybody can build on, that anybody can access, what does that mean for how you monetize or how you commercialize your propositions? Again, the business model, the tokenomics, if you're talking about a token structure. How do you grow the ecosystem? What projects, partners, developer relations activity do you need to draw people to the project that you're particularly looking at? And how do you think about competitors? So which blockchain is right for your project? A really, really important question, and one that I think is oversimplified a lot of the time. There are hundreds of layer ones and an increasing number of layer two scaling solutions that represent the protocols underneath the applications that we build. And some high level view is that typically the categories fall into public versus private. There are far fewer instances of private blockchain networks, Hyperledger Fabric being the most well known. But when it comes to public blockchains, a much, much broader canvas to paint with. Anyone can participate. It typically requires a cryptocurrency to support, to keep the economic security of the network running, to be able to pay for the validators who manage the network, keep it running and process transactions or validate transactions. Typically very highly decentralized, but often limited in terms of throughput in some cases. Private networks very much more about creating what used to be called a LAN, a local area network, a series of known parties, typically doesn't require crypto, but where those nodes that keep the network running make it more secure, where the data is shared across all parties but can still be permissioned, so not everybody sees all of the data all of the time, and typically can have a higher throughput. These networks are more often used where KYC or knowledge of who you're transacting with is more common, or where sensitive corporate or commercial data is seen as a risk to be placing in a public environment. And of course, there's a hybrid model where you can see private networks anchoring certain information to a public network for transparency reasons, because actually they would like other people globally to engage with it. Maybe they want to create a network where there's access to or the ability to transact or to share data with a series of sensors or IoT devices, where that information can be shared publicly, it can be transacted publicly, and then rolled back up into a private network. The scaling considerations as to why you would allow for data or information to be received or written in a public and permissionless environment versus in a private and closed environment, materially different depending on which industry you're looking at. Some important considerations that I think when you're looking at evaluating which blockchain technology to work with, you've got technical and non-technical features. From a technical perspective, the standards that are available, the security and privacy of the network, and also the level of decentralization is important too. This talks about how well scaled is the network, how well secure is the network. Can it be switched off? If the blockchain can stop producing blocks, that's typically a bad sign, and that it's potentially at risk further on, or that it's not delivering decentralization in a way that's valuable to those people who are using it for that purpose. Performance will often come up, right? So number of transactions per second, the fee structure on that particular blockchain, those are usually used as a comparison between Ethereum, which is one of the most well-known and largest blockchains out there, versus its competitors. But at the same time, also interoperability plays an important part. So Polkadot as a layer 0 blockchain, actually, its primary purpose is to have a shared security infrastructure that any chain can opt into. So shared security means that everybody from the start has an already ready-made, robust and secure network of validators that are helping to protect the network. But also you've got inbuilt interoperability between different chains. So if you have different blockchains providing different functionality, those are composable, so they can be taken, used, data can be shared between different platforms seamlessly, using a concept called XCM, cross-consensus messaging, or XCMP in parachain to parachain considerations. But essentially that you're able to share messages, you're able to share tokens, you're able to access functionality that is deployed on different blockchains and compose that to create your own experiences and applications, which in a blockchain context can be incredibly powerful. Non-technical features, ecosystem is one of the most important. So to what extent is there a strong code base available of applications, of automated test scripts, of easy to start scripts to be able to work with it, people building on that particular platform? How strong is the developer community there in terms of being able to get access to talent? Perceived brand or value, market cap. These are typically kind of halo effect marketing factors, but also volatility of the token price matters. If you're going to be transacting, are there stable coins available on that network so you can transact without the risk of volatility? What is the quality of support available to people building on that particular infrastructure, or the documentation available? If it's still quite nascent, quite new, still under recent testing, that may be less attractive to an enterprise audience with a high security and risk threshold. And there are plenty of examples out here. This is one from Martin Holowski, which I posted a little while back, and he's done a like-for-like comparison with some of the most well-known blockchains, looking in his case at consensus mechanism, the time it takes to create finality to validate the transaction, number of transactions per second, number of ecosystem applications. Are oracles available to provide data from external factors into particular applications or smart contracts? Is it compatible with the Ethereum blockchain? What is its security model? Lots of different considerations, and they will be different depending on who you are and what application you're looking at. There's also the opportunity to build your own blockchain. So you don't have to necessarily be an application builder on those existing layer ones and layer twos. You could actually say, you know what, because we want to have our own cryptocurrency, our own unique governance and standards, we want to have a consensus mechanism that's unique to us, not just around tokens and staking, but maybe about the contributions of the individuals on the network. That could be their time, their steps, their Wi-Fi connectivity. There's a whole bunch of different consensus that doesn't necessarily play, or that's innovative or different to traditional consensus mechanisms. Or you may have a particular balance of security, scalability, and decentralization that you need to enable for whatever it is that you're trying to enact. So if you haven't watched this, Gavin Wood's Web3 Summit presentation from Berlin in 2018, 4 years ago, and he used Substrate as the underlying framework for building on Polkadot. He built a blockchain with customized features in 15 minutes, which in terms of how accessible blockchain is, how quickly you can spool up and start tinkering with the technology is incredibly powerful. And the capabilities have moved on significantly over the last 4 years. In my view, the barriers to entry for this space have never been lower. Right? We have open source code. We have a community-centric model where there are lots of people, organizations, advocates, developer relations staff, ecosystem staff who are supporting and able to provide guidance and expertise to the community. So anybody looking to build there, you'll find lots of help. There's lots of existing infrastructure for the most part. In some cases, on certain different blockchains, there's less tooling available, there's less data tools available or testing tools available, but that's growing and improving every day. There's a variety of different propositions that there are ways to create a living, the ways to create a startup, the ways to engage and to use your existing Web 2 skills to support a Web 3 community. Tooling being a great example. Lots of the data platform players, lots of the cloud and infrastructure players have traditional Web 2 and cloud businesses or traditional data and as a service businesses, but are applying those capabilities into blockchain and Web 3. You have a gig economy model where it's actually relatively straightforward to hire developers in terms of their capability for building on your project. There may be a number of non-development opportunities as well. If we talk about lowering the barriers to entry and economic inclusion, the ability to provide support as a developer in the gig economy, but also to engage with blockchain propositions as an artist or in terms of play to earn in the gaming space, there are ways that people all around the world can earn a wage engaging with some of these platforms in a way that may not have been quite the same when you talk about Web 2. And simple as a service propositions that exist as well. So the ability to provide content, business administration and funding, but then compose the different components of a platform. Here's an example. If you wanted to create an NFT platform selling digital art, there are white label marketplaces that have the storefronts, payments capability and databases. You can pull existing blockchain and wallet connectivity from a number of different layer ones that are out there. You can look at outsourced support and management through Discord channels. Compliance software for tax and accounting already exists and are pluggable, and the community to providing further content to help grow the platform. Right? The amount that you need to contribute to build a Web3 proposition at this point is actually relatively low because you have white label services as a service capabilities in other areas. And it's about creating a collaboration mindset. It's not, or in my recommendation would be not to look at this saying which is the best blockchain, rather saying there are a number of different blockchains that are going to be increasingly interoperable and connected to each other. No one chain is going to win, and there are plenty of examples of blockchain migrations or projects moving from one blockchain to another because they saw another ecosystem was a better fit for them, or they got access to funding, or they had particular struggles working with one technology, or they had more developer talent that fits better with Rust than with Solidity, for example, different languages, lots of different reasons. But think about this as an ecosystem of multiple chains rather than a zero-sum game of whose chain is the best, because generally speaking, that's the direction of travel. And if you're making great things for individuals, chances are you've got a better chance of success. It's not about building blockchain things because blockchain. If you're solving problems for users, developers, founders, validators, investors, there's a good chance your project is going to be a success. So if you want to find out more, please do feel free to reach out. I'm very happy for people to connect with me on LinkedIn. If you're interested, please do go check out the podcast and YouTube channel, Blockchain Won't Save the World. If you want to hear more from me or get more examples of the history of how blockchain is being applied and where it may fit in your particular experience, organization, use case. And if you just want to learn more, I'd be very happy to reach out.
Thanks so much, Antony. That was great and really interesting. But sadly, we have already ticked over time a little bit. So we're going to have to leave the Q&A for now. We've had a few questions come in, but we'll have to leave that for now. I'm sure next time maybe you can answer that when we've got the rest of the things people don't warn you about blockchain. All the important things they never tell you about blockchain, should I say. But thank you for taking the time to speak to us today. We really appreciate it. And it was really interesting.
Thanks, Catherine. Appreciate that. And if anybody wants to follow up with a question that we didn't get time for today, very happy to take that offline.
Brilliant, brilliant. And thank you to the audience for watching. Make sure you stay tuned to check out the rest of the speakers we've got at Tech and AI Live.